So, what is like your general view like on the paranormal? And each of you can like answer.
Um, I do not believe in the paranormal, as I don't think there is enough scientific evidence for it.
Okay, so fine.
I'm very much in the same boat. At the moment, I don't believe in it, and but I would be happy to accept any evidence to the contrary.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I echo the following comments. That I don't think it is a real natural phenomenon, but I think it's quite an interesting exploration of human psychology as much as anything else. But as I say, the evidence isn't there, but we're skeptics, so if the evidence turns up, then we accept that.
Okay.
I mostly agree with what they said. I think the word paranormal itself is sort of a loaded word that proponents of paranormal stuff, use that word to describe things that really are already sort of pre-debunked. That's why they call it paranormal, because they know it's going against all the evidence that exists.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a loaded word, but I think it sort of already entails its own demise in itself.
Okay. Well, thank you. How do you go about like debunking ghosts and such like?
Well, we don't, but and I guess debunking is not necessarily the right word for it. But anytime there's any claim made of paranormal activity, and usually it's via social media or such like, it's usually quite easy to take a look and figure out exactly what the facts are versus what the speculation is. And if you speak to anybody individually, they will maybe insist to you that they have had a paranormal experience. And there's no real way to actually debunk that. But what you can do is, I think as Alex said, is look at the natural phenomena in human psychology that we already know about, and at least ask the questions to try and rule those out.
Right. Okay.
Also, it's always good to look at, gather as many facts as possible to see maybe if the conditions, the paranormal experience happened where particular, maybe some substances were involved, or maybe subjects with not a straight mind.
Okay. Anybody else want to further comment?
I guess it's also sort of Occam's razor. In addition to gathering evidence, you have to gather multiple hypotheses. If you're not comparing different hypotheses, then you're not really investigating thoroughly. If you just say, here's a hypothesis, ghost did it, that fits the evidence, it fits the evidence, but is it really much more likely than a naturalistic hypothesis, which usually doesn't get pursued?
I think in that respect, the organisations that generally do these paranormal investigations, a lot of them have maybe had experiences themselves, so when they start doing the investigations, they're doing it from the point of view that it's already there and it's already real, and how do they go about measuring it and proving it, which goes towards, I think, some of the things that you'll see that, I don't know whether it's Glasgow Paranormal Investigations or other groups use, they'll have the EMF readers, and they'll be measuring ambient temperature in the rooms and things like that, or doing electronic voice phenomenon. And unfortunately with those, if you've already kind of decided in your head that ghosts exist, then you are much more likely to misinterpret any of the results you get from those readings. And you see that a lot in the kind of pseudoscientific realms of paranormal investigations.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think at the root of skepticism is the kind of procedural part of it. It's not a set of ideas or beliefs or a kind of a cynical rejection of kind of things that other people believe in. It's kind of trying to apply kind of systematic, scientific kind of approaches to trying to distinguish what's real and what's not real. So the kind of fundamental strategy, I guess that's kind of what the question was getting at, is just applying kind of logical approaches, scientific approaches to try and falsify the existence, i.e.,
Or
if you can,
confirm.
to not falsify in terms of to try and purposely debunk, but going through the process that science goes through, which is to try and establish whether something is likely to be true based on whether, given sort of rigorous testing, you don't end up proving that it's false. And that's what we do with, I mean, I say we, I'm not a scientist, but that's what we as a sort of, as a culture do with science is try and make hypotheses, test them to destruction, and if they don't fall down, then we say, well, there might be something in it. And the problem with ghost hunting is what you tend to do is set up lots of scenarios, like you were saying, with sort of the electronic voice phenomenon. I could only think of rude words at that point. It's lots of different ways that you can take out of context what is a normal natural phenomena, and you can read patterns and false positives into what is just random or natural events, and attribute some kind of greater meaning.
Okay. What I will say is, like, there's loads of, like, skeptics that take to, like, channels like YouTube and stuff like that. There's one that I tried to get in contact with, actually, called Captain Disillusionment, and he goes through like piece by piece, like so-called evidence of ghosts and such, like, and he'll like debunk them. And is there anyone that like does that, like, in your group, that'll like go into that kind of length, or?
Not in our immediate group, no. We don't have that amount of spare time in our hands. But I'm aware of Captain Disillusion. I saw him speak at a conference last year. He's phenomenal. And his area of expertise is primarily on video, like viral videos and how they're faked and such like. So he's dedicated a fair amount of his time to looking at paranormal viral videos that have come to his attention, and looking at, you know, what's going on there. And there's a number of different ones where one in particular, it was definite trickery that was going on, and he explained that. One of them, it was a sort of a normal anomaly that happened with old security camera footage with old tape on it and stuff, that sort of thing. But I mean, he's based in the States actually, but in the UK there is actually a former ghost hunter called Hayley Stevens, who's now a skeptic, and she still does get involved in ghost hunts, and I happily point you towards her website, because not only does she talk about the different methods that are used and the type of mistakes that are made when doing it, but she's also put together or has compiled a code of conduct that she believes that paranormal investigators should follow with regards to the properties they enter, the people that they get involved in it, and such like. Now, I've seen her speak a couple of times, and you know, the most you'll hear from her is she's been on investigations and things have happened that she can't explain. But she does not make the jump and say it was definitely a ghost, and that's where the line gets drawn. The skepticism, it's something happened, I don't know quite what it was, I can't replicate it or measure it. So I'm not going to make assumptions. I'm going to go back to the drawing board and measure again. So there are people out there who would be happy to put you in contact. I'm sure Hayley would be happy to speak to you actually if you want. She's certainly more accessible than Captain Disillusion is.
There's also a parapsychology department at the University of Edinburgh.
Yeah, Richard Wiseman and Caroline Watt.
Yeah,
Caroline Watt.
Yeah, both of whom you've had speak.
Yeah, they've spoken for us here before. And again, they've put some very rigorous tests in place to look at paranormal phenomenon. And as Alex said up near the top, you know, a lot of time you're more exploring the frailties of human psychology rather than actually proving there's ghosts out there.
Okay. So, like, Scotland has, like, a long history of, like, legends and mythology. Like, I mean, our national animal is literally a unicorn, so, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, is that, like, a fair assessment to say that it has that, like connection, and therefore is it fair for like us to essentially make money off of the back of like legends and such like?
I mean, I would say that, you know, there's a difference between sort of an assertion of what is true and, you know, and what is false, and sort of a cultural history. You know, I don't think that we're not sort of kind of meanies sort of trying to kind of ruin everyone's fun. I mean, Scotland does have that kind of rich history. You go from sort of the Loch Ness Monster down to, you know, Edinburgh with kind of the ghost tours in the Caspians there. I think it's fair enough to say that Scotland has that, because it's got an ancient culture, and there's always going to be that kind of mythic side to it.
I guess it depends on how you advertise it and how you're profiting off of it, because there's the cultural and historical element that is real and that is fascinating, and to visit sites that had relevance to people for things that I think are made up reasons is still really interesting. I still want to see those things. They're still great. Or even if the Loch Ness Monster, which is like more clearly a hoax and not like a cultural belief or anything.
Says that foreigner.
You know, it's still fun if you're advertising it like fun or just as cultural heritage or something like that. That is, I think, fine. It's when you start selling it as, come look at this, pay me money because it's true. That I think is sneaky.
Yeah, and when it takes advantage of some kind of weakness or vulnerability within people, so that's when we start to be slightly more critical of, say, psychic mediums, because there's a direct relationship with someone who's grieving by definition at the time. Whereas, you know, someone who goes to Loch Ness to spot the monster, maybe, you know, that's not as...
I've been to the museum in Loch Ness for the Loch Ness one, so that's actually, I mean, there are all the presumed pictures and some facts about the loch and everything. And if you go there and you visit, and they're not selling it to you as the ultimate truth, so...
Yeah. From a skeptic's perspective, one of the questions we always ask when you're assessing something, not just whether it's true or false, but what's the harm? And, you know, it tends to fall in a couple of different places. Number one, are people giving up their money? Are they being ripped off financially? And number two, as Alex said, is it causing them physical or emotional damage? Now, in the case of paranormal investigations, or even like the ghost tours, right? Everybody loves a ghost story, right? I've been on the ghost tours a couple of times. They're brilliant because they're fun, and you shouldn't take them too seriously. And there's a beautiful little merging of history and stuff, and then, you know, these exciting stories they tell you, and it helps you kind of put yourself into a state of imagination about what life was like at the time. All right, now Scotland isn't the only place. I mean, anywhere where you've got dead people, you're going to have paranormal investigations happening. So it's certainly not unique to us. So in general, the paranormal, the ghost hunt type things, this is people with their own disposable income who've maybe watched Most Haunted on the telly and thought that might be fun. Okay, it's the same as going on the ghost ride at a fun park, really. But if there are vulnerable people there, and perhaps particularly if they've been recently bereaved, then it strays into the territory of harm, and that's where you need to be applying that code of ethics that I spoke about earlier on.
Okay. Right, so this is basically getting on to my last question now. So, do you believe that there's currently like a sort of rise in secularism in Scotland that could, you know, affect like